all the athletic things are the things, all the violence that I've seen in the world, all the gunshots that have come at me, all the things my mom, that was, that meditation retreat was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. Sitting with myself in silence and using breath as a tool to observe whatever comes up.
For the audience that doesn't know, here we're with Anthony Kelley. Where do I begin? This man has a journey unlike many, and if there's anyone similar to him, it would be that of the pioneers or the cowboys or the first people who have went over the hill to, you know, defy what's expected of them. So I think that's a perfect segue. For those who don't know, tell me about you. Where do you come from, and let's talk about your story a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on the show. You know, it's awesome and finally kind of come to fruition with all the conversations we had in the past. A big part of, you know, being able to have a chance to share this is a new thing for me, because I've kind of, like I said before prior, is I kind of removed myself from being in the public for some time to kind of dig onto these philosophies or ideas and what you're talking about. But I'm originally from Los Angeles. I grew up kind of traveling around with my mom, kind of gypsy style, back and forth, you know, throughout the whole California area. Really, for me, what kind of helped me kind of manage the kind of frequent moving of going around all over the place and kind of escaping kind of dangerous situations was athletics. That was kind of an outlet for me as a way to help me kind of channel that energy. Because as a young child, I was diagnosed with like ADHD and ways to try to manage the energy and stuff like that. Hard time being within these kind of traditional class frameworks.
Right.
And so athletics became a really clear outlet for me. And that just over time, you know, became a mechanism to kind of keep me busy and kind of kept me out of trouble. Over time, that eventually turned into an opportunity for me to pursue athletics on a higher level. You know, academics for me wasn't necessarily a focus point because of the particular structure I was in. And it wasn't until I got to college, after I had a chance to receive a Division I scholarship to University of Washington to play football. It was in John Muir High School in Pasadena. And after traveling to 5 different middle schools and been around 5 different high schools, you know, for me, college sports wasn't even a thing. It was more so kind of a thing that occupied my time when I would kind of witness abusive situations or dangerous circumstances. And so athletics wasn't really like a goal for mine in terms of becoming a professional athlete. It was just kind of an outlet. And because I was blessed with these particular talents, it rolled into these opportunities for me to be able to go to the University of Washington on a full ride scholarship. It was...
So you was killing in high school. In
Yeah.
football, you was dominating.
Yeah.
Full ride to Washington.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, being a high school football star, it was something that was interesting because I wasn't interested in the attention, but I more so appreciated the competitiveness and the community that was rooted in sports. What I liked about athletics was how it really exposed and helped craft your character, really. Because those relationships with the coaches were kind of a supplement for my missing father.
Wow.
The anger and the frustration by hitting people was a way to put that energy out without using it on the streets. And it just happened to be that I was very fast, coordinated, and had a good ability to track people down. And so becoming one of the top prospects in, you know, the United States for any school, I mean, it was interesting because I was kind of like thrust into this limelight with Michigan, Nebraska, I mean, Washington, UCLA, all these kind of high-profile Division I schools, and I really had no interest in like the sport of football itself. I never watched the game. I didn't have a favorite team. Yeah, and that's why, again, athletics for me, it was a very interesting space because it was this great place to express myself physically, because I really didn't get exposed to dance or nothing like that.
Right.
But it was a way to really express myself in a physical way, to expend energy that I didn't have to use in another way, you know what I mean, through violence or outbreak, you know. And academics for me just wasn't fast enough because my attention, I would grab things really fast and then I would lose focus and then I'm outside all day and the teachers are looking for me.
Classic, yeah,
You know what I mean? So that was kind of,
outside.
in a nutshell, you know, kind of going through this experience as an athlete. And it was interesting too because I was sort of this kind of myth amongst the colleges because I moved around so much. I would play a football season and something would happen and I'd have to move. So I would like dominate and then I would leave and people were like, who is this dude? Where is he at? And so for me, I never really thought about going to college because I moved so much. It wasn't until my coach literally just saw me dominating the game and just asked me like, would you like to go to college? I was like, well, okay.
Who was this coach?
It was Jason Bourne and Tony Crutchfield and Eric and Coach Eric. They were all at John Muir High School and they literally walked me through the process because I was a Prop 48 going into the University of Washington. I didn't have the grades high school wise. I didn't have the SAT. I barely had the SAT score after taking it like 8 times. And so for me, I was so excited about just having an opportunity to get out the hood because one of the things that I had a big fear about was being one of those gifted athletes that just stayed in the projects or in the neighborhood. Because we have so many, because me getting a Division I wasn't even one of the best athletes. I was a part of a track team that was, you know, nationally recognized and I wasn't even on their B team, you know? And so we had all this incredible talent, but not a lot of, you know, guidance and mentorship to help us capitalize on that. And so for me to get out, that was a real big kind of opportunity because I was thinking if I didn't go to college, I was just going to the military, honestly.
Wow. So that was like an outlet for you to get out of the hood, to create a better.
Well, my ego was more so like I didn't want to be an embarrassment because being famous about being a great athlete and then doing nothing with it, that was kind of a weird thing for me, you know, especially getting all this attention, you know, and so it put this type of pressure on me where I felt this pressure or obligation of having to do something with myself because of all this attention I was getting at the time.
And I think that's a segue into like where we're going to explore today because here we are, I don't know how many years later, and you are, you know, you are a scholar, you're an accomplished teacher, a consultant, you know, you do amazing work with schools all around the world. And coming from that, I guess you can say humble beginning of an athlete with a ticket to college, where did that path go from athleticism to the next journey of your life?
Well, athleticism, like I said, or athletics was an outlet for me. And with not having a strong relationship with my father, witnessing the abuse of my mom, seeing the way that we had to move around so much and constantly in this survival kind of mode, athletics for me was just kind of a way to outside of the craziness. And then another outlet was essentially women, and we could talk about probably another episode, but these were the kind of the 2 outlets that I had that allowed me to feel safe. Athletics, I was able to express myself through agility, strength, and dominance with my abilities. And with women, I was able to be vulnerable and safe, you know what I mean? Because they allowed me to because they were so enthralled in me, it allowed me to just kind of drop my guard down. So these were kind of the 2 spaces that I occupied a lot through my high school years and even in college years as ways to help me manage the chaos that I was in. It wasn't until as I started getting mature, I started maturing and started broadening my understanding of myself through education while I was able to better understand the why behind my attachment. And so for football, for me, because I didn't have the genuine interest in just like the game or the sport itself, it was more so the camaraderie in the community, the competitiveness, the challenge of my physical ability and how it really forced me to think about my character and what I'm made of, my, you know, courage and stuff like that. And then the pressure of being in front of such massive crowds of millions of people and seeing how do you mentally focus. So there was a lot of dynamics that I enjoyed outside of the politics of the fame and, you know, all those other things. And so I was fortunate enough where my ability allowed me to be in a position to maximize that ability, you know, to be on the field. But when it came to the idea of doing it for a living, looking at the position and power and privilege that is bestowed on athletes, thinking about the type of system that exploits athletes in that capacity, especially athletes that are not clear about what it means to be in that position of power and privilege. There was experiences about traveling outside of the U.S., working with rural area communities in South Africa and stuff that really forced me to ask some serious questions, and then also understand what was the big reason why behind my athletic prowess. And a part of that was getting attention from my father because he wasn't there, expressing myself because I didn't really have an outlet when I was angry and frustrated, as a way to build income to take care of my mom because I was so tired of seeing her struggle. It was kind of a way of privilege because when I was acknowledged as an athlete, it gave me access to certain levels of privilege in communities, and then at the end of my high school career, I didn't have nothing else going on. So free scholarship to go play athletics and compete and learn possibly, or go to the military and figure out how to, damage people. And that was my mindset. There was no in between. So that's where it was difficult for me, again, being in that kind of isolated where my father wasn't, he was, of course, go to league, go pro, so he can build on his hustle and what he had. My mom was more neutral, where she was just like, I just want you to be happy and do what you want, you know what I mean? And so, it was interesting. Getting to college and actually being a starting athlete at a Division I school that was competing for national titles every year, going to Rose Bowl, competing against Drew Brees. I mean, like, I'm there. ESPN, I'm already there in the light. It was just a matter of me wanting to just say yes, you know what I mean, and just take the ticket and go.
So there was a moment. So you're saying there was a moment when you were at that threshold, that precipice. Of course, what's the next step after that moment?
Well,
NFL?
yeah, it was literally the NFL for me because we came off winning. Well, every season we almost went to the Rose Bowl national championship. This season when we went to the Rose Bowl, we beat Miami, we beat Michigan. Drew Brees was in the Rose Bowl. I sacked him the first play of the game. We smashed the Boilermakers at the end of that game. 5 days later, I went to South Africa. I was one of the first athletes to ever receive Bill Gates' wife's academic scholarship.
Wow.
And then I brought, it was when I went to South Africa where the shift really happened for me because, again, being such a high-profile athlete in that capacity, I was exposed to something that really rocked me to my spirit, you know what I mean? And it wasn't me being famous or being an NFL star or being in that line that was uncomfortable for me because I was always in that light. It was going to South Africa and working with kids and being a part of a community that didn't give a shit about none of that.
How did that South African trip happen? Like, how did that?
One of the things is my coach, Coach Williams, Tom Williams. He was my linebacker coach, and he eventually ended up becoming like the head coach, I think at Yale or something. But he was a big time athlete at Stanford, and I remember I got the starting position, outside linebacker. They made the announcement, and I was playing. I was getting ready to come into the season, and literally I was like, I'm bored. I'm not really interested in it. It was my second year. This was scary for me because I'm in my scholarship. I have this huge obligation. I'm thankful for them, but how do I reconcile the fact that I may not be interested in being a football player? Like, I was just going through the motions and fulfilling my obligation. Contract.
So there was a deep unsettlement.
Unsettlement. So I went to the coach, my position coach, and I went into his office and I saw this picture. And one, I was kind of joking with him, capping on him because he had the little white outfit on with the red scarf, and he was in Spain, I think, running from the bulls. First of all, I'm like, brother, what are you doing running from the bulls? What you doing? And he's like, yo, I had a chance to get out the country. And when he said that, I was like, and then I talked to him, he said, if anything, he goes, don't tell the other coaches I told you, but if the best thing I could give you, advice I can give you, is get out and see the world. And when he said that, I was like, he just planted the seed. And then I went to my counselor, and her name was Sarah Winter, and I told her, I said, I think I might be interested in studying abroad. And then literally, because I was one of the first athletes to ever do it, it literally became like secret mission, educate at AK, because I chose
to do it or not to do it?
To do it, to go through with it. And so my academic counselor, Stan Chernikoff, who was the director at the time, Sarah Winter was my academic advisor, now had Arlene Padeo, who was there helping me. We all had to come together to figure out how do we get this athlete to be able to explore this academic experience.
But I imagine there was a conflict of interest.
Of course. I'm a starting athlete, going abroad, coaches are losing control of that, but
money to be made off
but
of you.
Technically I'm there to be a student, so I had leverage and an athlete. So the priority is that if on an off season, if I want to take advantage of any academic opportunity, I could do that. So it wasn't during the season.
So it almost sounds like you're in this position where you're like, you have two roads. one road is to go down the same system, and most athletes go down. Almost, dare I say, to become a commodity
Yeah.
of the game.
There's a system that helps it make it very comfortable to do that.
To become, controlled by the game itself. And somehow this was like unsettling with you. And here you had this opportunity and you like had to get out.
Yeah.
You went to South Africa.
Yeah, and the idea was the South Africa program was about studying truth within the governmental framework and community perspective, identity, conflict, and resolution.
Wow.
So, and that was looking under the umbrella of pre and post-apartheid policy. So when I looked at South Africa and its history, I find it very similar to our own. So that was another intriguing thing, like, being able to go to a country that was almost like a snapshot of our own past. So now the educational part started getting some momentum with me. Because of me, it's like this chance to be able to go into our history and touch and feel it. We go into the community, we develop a project, we work with something existing, or we create our own. And then for me, thinking about going back to Africa, as a black man, I'm like, are you away going back home? So in my mind, it was like, all right. And so I started digging into that, and then that's when it led to me getting this academic scholarship, because I was a broke college student, even on scholarship. You know what I mean? I had scholarship that paid for my living as a college athlete, but anything outside of that I couldn't do. So plane tickets to South Africa, they covered my tuition, my books, everything, but getting there. So I applied for a Mary Gates scholarship, and that was the Mary Gates scholarship established by Bill Gates Sr., Bill Gates Jr.'s father, his wife. Mary Gates was his, and she was the one that was really supporting undergraduate education. So it was the most prestigious undergraduate education scholarship you can get. And I got mine under leadership. And so that was a big deal, being a student athlete, getting such an award. And now all of a sudden I started having this perspective shift in terms of people talking to me as this commodity. But now all of a sudden there's a different type of way, like, wow, he's a little bit more than just this athlete. And so I started having these folks come to me and talk to me in this different tone. It was really weird being acknowledged now for like this academic leadership perspective, where all my life I've been known for just tracking folks down on the field or
follow the play.
Exactly.
Do what I tell
and
you.
I was great. I'm coachable. I'm great personality, all these things. But academically, now I'm shifting into this other realm. And when I actually went through with it, South Africa just put me in a position to experience things that were bigger than me consistently. And it wasn't about my locker, about my cleats, about my clothes, about my plays, about making sure that I'm talking to the media or I'm okay to make sure I can perform. It had shit to do with me and about how did I best prepare myself to support this community. And that was the shift, where being a part of a system that wasn't catered around me and my ego, and that was a new experience.
Wow. So that's a perfect segment to like purpose and why. What is your why?
I think my why was rooted in when, after leaving or going to college, to that South African experience and working with a community that needed support and help, and I missed an opportunity to support them. Like I came there, I was supposed to teach them something, to help share some skills, and this is fresh off the football field, not really fully bought into my academics yet. And the only thing that I was able to offer was like push-ups and sit-ups and athletic drills. And these were kids that were starving in the townships of Guguletu that was ravaged by AIDS and poverty and sickness. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? And is that all I had to offer? And then that's when I was like, I was just like, I'm in this Division I college, and it always gets me emotional talking about it, but it was this point of service to do right for others, and I missed it. That was a shift. I missed an opportunity to be something better for somebody else, and I was caught up in myself. And so that moment of acknowledging how in a position of power I was in to serve and to benefit others, and I missed it because I was thinking about myself. And so it really made it hard to value athletics. But I had to be honest about the opportunities it brought. So that's where the conflict within me started, having to reconcile this position of power and privilege as an athlete within this institutional framework that I'm being exploited in, but They are providing me opportunities to better myself. But what am I doing with those opportunities? And that's when I was like, I gotta stop fucking around.
That's wild.
Yeah,
That changed the whole.
yeah, and it took me
the
right
whole
to my
drive.
ancestors. It took me right to my ancestors, thinking like in our state, in the United States, you think about, Harriet Tubman. You think about, all these folks in our Marcus Garvey, all these folks that we're seeing and what they did with their position in power and what they put on the line for us. What was I doing with that? So that really like shook me to like take more responsibility.
I think we've all had moments like that, and that's why here on Beyond the Hustle, we're so fascinated in exploring these elements that drive people, and I can really sense that you have such a like powerful drive, and I didn't know that was a moment that really shifted your perspective. Was the drop catch?
Yeah, I almost quit football. I mean, they literally had to convince me to stay with my scholarship. I was in South Africa and I was like, I was so ashamed. I was just like, I'm worrying about catching a fucking ball and chasing someone down.
People are going through.
And these people are fucking dying. Like these kids were showing up every day at 3:00 on the dot with lesions on their skin and shit, sickness and like all type of shit. And I'm like teaching them fucking how to do push-ups. And I'm like, God damn.
I mean, look. I was telling you earlier. Again.
Well, that's that part.
Rome, right? We
Yeah.
talk about like Rome. We talk about the Colosseum. We talk about the circus.
Yeah, and it's a concept.
We talk about
Yeah.
entertainment. And I always found it fascinating knowing you, why you decided to leave that,
Yeah.
to explore something which I feel is more meaningful to me, which is this concept of community. So I can sense that is purpose, and I think this is great to like talk about belief now, and like, because I feel like you're very wise, almost wise beyond your years, because during that time most people wouldn't give up a ticket, as we say in the industry, the meal ticket to the league, whatnot, right? So like, what allowed you to do that? Where did that belief come from? That you would be, that you can reconcile or you can redeem yourself.
Well, the thing is really having it was a process of one, understanding like the position I was in, and then now sitting in that discomfort of now the one thing that I thought was most important may not be no more. And so now I'm at the point where I'm at the show. All I got to do is finish the season, do what I do on the field, enter the draft, and I'm in it. I'm going to work hard. I know how to do that game. I'm right there. But because this experience and the shift that I had was so profound, one of the things that I was very fearful of is that I was going through this experience in South Africa and this shift by myself. I didn't have my mom there, my father. I didn't have a mentor to like help me with it. I was in a community framework that was clearly still rooted in a systematic approach to oppress people that look just like my family back home in the United States, even more raw. Like one of the little girl's fathers that I was working with, he literally would pick up stones every day and just pack up little pebbles in a truck and get paid like 50 Rand, which was not even like $1, all day. You know what I mean? Like he was in that, and his daughter was born post-apartheid. Like I'm seeing these two generations in the townships. Like I met Stephen Biko's family. I went to his gravesite. I met with Robert Sobukwe's auntie and uncle. That was like, Robert Sobukwe was the one that was murdered. That was, in South Africa, part of the fall of apartheid. Like I met the shakers, like the Martin Luther Kings and Malcolm X's of their community framework. And so for me, it was like, what are you doing with this position of power and privilege and education you have access to? You have a responsibility with that power. You know what I mean? So that was the big shift, but I didn't know what that meant because I didn't have a mentor that was willing to help me stand up against that type of system. It was me having to be bold. Because when I came back with that boldness about like my academics is priority, I'll do football to fulfill the obligation. You can see the tentativeness with my coaches and with my mentors, and then I started pushing that to the athletes, and they started to believe. And when I started getting them to be inspired, you can see the institution was like, yo, wait a minute, you're fucking with our bottom line. we can't have a bunch of Division I athletes studying abroad like you, because not everybody's, and then they started making me like the exceptional person, like that's AK and that's what he can do because of whatever, and then I became kind of this outsider, and then so for me,
Oh, that's funny. That's kind of you're saying this. So it started to unravel a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
You're like on the way to the NFL, but your heart is not there. You're trying to figure out how to make it work. This new perspective with this heavy system of I mean, shout out NFL. It's very entertaining, but there's something deeper that you needed to pursue. And
yeah.
the minute you started pursuing it and sharing it, things start to unravel.
Yeah, and so for me, that's when I started, not that I was realizing on something, but what I did not want to do is that I was so appreciative of the shift that happened with me internally that I didn't want to risk it going to the NFL. So it was worth me just going back into education or back into figuring out what I want to do in this next step to be broke and poor. And to without, I'd rather be broken poor with this shift in me versus rich and blind and compromised. You know what I mean? And so for me, I went in, and that's when I had Ed Taylor at the time, who he still now is I think he's the dean of undergraduate education at University of Washington. He was the one that mentored me into my master's program. And that was the program that really allowed me to start thinking about these ideas of education and applying. In my degree was education leadership and policy study. How do we look at things from the macro and micro level, and then how are we as institutional leaders building levels of accountability systematically? And then, of course, extracting the appropriate information to make any institutional framework improve or be aware of their gaps. So that was kind of my master's. And I did that through then developing my own programs abroad. And so when I started digging into this work, you could also see too, because I did have this. So on the off season, I wouldn't play. I wouldn't do. Obviously, I let the football go. I went to start training for the Olympics. I had a friend of mine named Warren Hooker. I was going to do the Olympics and the hurdles, but I had such kind of a sour taste in my mouth from the road that I saw myself going down through athletics that it just wasn't appealing to me no more. I mean, I was gonna get ready to go to the Olympics. And then I started playing off season with like Nate Robinson, Jamal Crawford, and basketball and stuff like that, and had the NBA stuff
It's
ready.
like you had an epiphany.
Yeah,
It's like you can't. It's like, I know this is a crazy metaphor, but it's like you can't dance when people are dying.
That's a perfect way to put
just
it.
shook you.
Yeah, and it shook me so much to the
I
point
can't
where
I can't go pretend.
I can't. And what happened is that I was able to participate, in terms of the recreation. But when you started asking me to get paid for it and give my time and effort, I couldn't care about it that much. And that was the faith part in terms of how I'm starting to understand my belief. But then also too, when I start taking responsibility for that in my life in that way, other things in my life, my relationships with women, my relationships with community, all these things starting to come up, because with this position of power and privilege, and I know I'm attractive, I have a personality, I have these attributes within my community framework that makes me an asset, especially to women. And for me, I did exploit that because women for me were a safe place to be. And so when I had to think about all the relationships in my life, not just my athletic relationship, it became difficult and I became overwhelmed, anxiety, and I started compartmentalizing. And though I was doing work in the community as an activist, as an executive with director of community work and whatnot, I still had this emotional discourse with myself I wasn't sure how to manage, even though I was making these big decisions. Right. And then that's when it ended up, the next kind of big shift that I would say that happened was when I ended up divorcing my first wife and really kind of shifting out of that, because I had these ideas of being married and having kids as a way to kind of reconcile what my mother and father didn't do. So I was in a hurry. So I jumped into a marriage fast. So I was in college, married, adopted 4 kids. I'm trying to figure out what does it mean to serve, be selfless. So I'm looking at the mechanisms that are in front of me. And after that, I had this shift where in the relationship, the marriage got to a point where there was so much trauma between my ex-wife and myself, and the systematic approach that we were taking to try to reconcile that wasn't working. And I had to acknowledge that I come from a family of violence. I'm first generation. I come out of a family of violence and deep violence. And so I'm the first generation of that type of practice that wasn't implemented. I've never been to jail. First generation, not going to jail.
Wow.
Not being violent towards domestics, any type. All my uncles have had some type of domestic abuse in some capacity. And I understood why, but I still had to make that choice. And so in that is where I removed myself from that first, that first marriage, because I felt like there was things in me that I still had to reconcile in terms of that generational practice. My second relationship with, Kimberly, my current wife, I ended up, and as I was exploring myself as an executive within the university framework, I had an affair on her. And that affair was rooted in the same practices in my past that I built up in high school. Compartmentalizing, not sure how to sharing my feelings, making assumptions, letting the ego position in power and not wanting to deal with it, And that forced me, it was kind of like that movie, that movie Denzel Washington, Flight?
I think so, yeah.
When he was like, at the end, he said, I reached the cap, I can't lie anymore. That was like me. It was like Kim was too much of a good person and she didn't deserve that. And it was just like, I got to take responsibility with how I'm hurting these women. So that became another shift in how am I managing this internal difficulty. And so I had such a hard time of reconciling this athletics, this new emotional space that I was exploring. And that's when I came across through Kim, because I was having like these emotional breakdowns. She introduced me to Vipassana meditation. And I always was fairly in shape because of my athletic prowess, you know what I mean? But Vipassana was the first step towards me really looking at these kind of holistic neutral tools that have been used for such a long time to help me manage the chaos of my internal turmoil. You get what I mean? And Vipassana was a practice that was rooted in observation, observing the senses and using breath as a way to observe. So I went to an 11-day silent retreat where I ate only vegetarian. I couldn't talk. I couldn't speak to nobody. Couldn't work out. Couldn't work out, stretch, nothing. All I could do was walk and sit and sleep. I did that for the first time, and that was probably, considering my life, I'm probably 30-something years old at that time, maybe late 20s. All the athletic things are the things, all the violence that I've seen in the world, all the gunshots that have come at me, all the things my mom, that meditation retreat was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. Sitting with myself in silence and using breath as a tool to observe whatever comes up. And it was that experience that took me down the road of helping me understand that my sadness, my depression, my anxiousness, my anxiety, no matter what it is, all of it is sensation, frequency. And the breath is a mechanism to help with blood circulation, oxygen flow. Sitting still is a practice of letting whatever chaos you've been to settle down. And when you learn to breathe and sit and observe the sensations that come up, that physical practice will allow you to track down whatever trauma, sensation, whatever that comes up. So for me, I'm sitting there 2 hours a day, just breathing, working out, and then all of a sudden I start crying, and all of a sudden I start thinking about the first time I was called a nigga. Like when I was 7 years old, like where was that coming from? You know what I mean? Or the first time I saw my mom get hit. Or when my dad broke his first promise of not coming up to my game. And so I also started making these connections to the why behind football and the why behind, then I started looking at religion, start looking at sexuality, my identity. And so I started really understanding. And so now it started coming down to, as I started opening myself up to this vulnerability, which was it was terrifying. I just was lucky enough to have a partner that was willing to go through it with me. And it was Kim, and she went through the same thing. And it was interesting because as we started coming together, going through our own experiences, we started also understanding, looking at each other like, why am I with you? And being clear and realizing that the self-care that we're practicing, there's a notion there. And self-care is not this idea of making sure you buy stuff for yourself or making sure that you're placing, your needs above others. No, it's about how are you honoring the intuition? How are you honoring what your body and spirit is telling you? How are you reconciling your physical presence and your spiritual presence? And as I started getting into the meditation through Vipassana, the yoga through movement, and thinking about the breathing, these three elements started helping me better sharpen and heightened my intuition, which now became the leader in terms of helping me understand where and how I should be, and that's where my belief system started to shift. And as traveling the world, I started understanding that all these belief systems are just the result of different communities and their spiritual experience. And so for me, that means that I am responsible for my own spiritual experience. So why is it that I chose to be a Baptist Christian? Or why is it that
Things start breaking down fast.
and I started shredding myself of all these ideologies and self and money? Why is it that I think that I need to have this position of power and privilege with money? And I started seeing, okay, so what is AK made of without any of this? Quit the job, I sold the house, did the first film on the documentary to talk about the tools that I've developed and to really try to capture how I'm approaching reconciling the trauma and showing how the benefit is not necessarily monetarily, but it's more so philosophically and universally, where as you reconcile these gaps within yourself, you're literally building the stepping stones for you to be your best self. And in that, whatever you do, you're going to be great in. And that philosophy is what I started building onto. So when I started going into my work, okay, so what is it? What type of work could I do?
Right. Where are we now? Like
What-
now, 2024.
yeah.
How are you channeling these
Exactly.
understandings?
Because now that I'm quit my job, how am I making a living within this framework? And that's what led to me being an entrepreneur. Because one of the three big pillars that I have found traveling the world and through my work were this idea of individual accountability. What steps do I take for myself, right? And as I think about myself as an individual, I'm responsible for me. I have no obligation to nobody else, technically. The second one was community. As an individual, I can make moves, I can come up with ideas, I can generate momentum. But when you attach yourself to a community that has like-minded information and ideas, same as yours, that kind of makes your work a little bit easier because you're connected with somebody and it's not you on your own. Right. And then this third element was the institutional framework. That institutional framework is the business element that helps you perpetuate and sustain the idea in the community in which you've built. And what I found is that throughout history, whether it's a positive or a negative movement, taking it out that way, I use an example like, we'll say in history, we have the Ku Klux Klan. Right. It was established, right after the, reconciliation or Reconstruction period, right? Right? And why was that established? There was people that were in fear, individuals in the community that were like, we're scared of losing our rights and what we fought for. Right. And there was other people in the community that also believed that. And so they came together around some ideas and philosophies and supported that momentum. And the government had a policy and framework to allow them to solidify themselves as an organization. Ku Klux Klan, right? So we have those three elements. And they were powerful, right? Fast forward a little bit. For a time. Right? Pushing their elements. Now we look at another organization. Black Panthers.
I think you were going to say Black Lives Matter.
Black Panthers.
Black Panthers.
Individuals that were tired of inequity, laws, neighborhoods, kids getting hit, food, laws taking advantage of them, individuals, right? And then you had a community that was like, yo, I'm with that. I also support that. I'm down. We'll put our shit together. And then what do they do? Government framework, established, organization, Black Panther Party. And so you see these three elements existing.
Say it one more time. Personal accountability.
We have individual accountability.
Individual accountability.
So your actions that you take, you know what I mean, as an individual whatever you want to do that you believe in. Right. And then what I found is that those individuals that are able to align themselves with community helps broaden those ideas.
So finding other like-minded
individuals, right?
With those same accountability, responsibility.
And these are neutral principles. I don't care if the system's good or not.
I see what you mean, because this can be applied to positive, optimistic individuals and potential nefarious.
Evil works just as hard as light. Light and dark work just as hard for each other, and those are neutral entities, and we have to choose how to use them. Okay, and so when we're looking at the community, then the third thing is that we're in a capitalistic framework. So how do you perpetuate, make a living, and spend the most of your time? That's the institutional framework. So when you think about me, I took individual to take accountability for my emotional discontent. I took accountability and action towards the things that were making me not feel comfortable. I went to look for community. That was difficult. Who I found in my community was my wife, Kimberly. So that's become my community now. Both of us are like-minded. We're sharing the same ideas. We're building my confidence, perpetuating this practice. And now my third attempt, my institutional framework, Anthony Kelley Consulting, LLC. Right. That's my institutional framework. I build that momentum, my money, my nonprofit. This is now my institutional framework that's going to allow me to help me be my best self. And that's been the journey up until this point, where everything that I've been going through, no matter what, and this gets into the practice of self-care, when I started realizing that my belief system is rooted now, first and foremost, is in learning to love myself head over heels unconditionally. And when I learn to do that and I practice how do I learn to deal with the shaming of myself, the guilt of myself, those principles that I learn to reconcile within myself allows me to better understand, because I believe we're all connected.
Right.
That allows me, as I dig that with myself, it allows me to recognize that in you faster. Because I believe we're just a slighter shade version of each other, I can tell if I'm working on it myself how you're dealing with your shame. I can also tell how you're dealing with your guilt. I can also tell how when you get position and power and privilege and money, how you want to use that. You know what I mean? Because I recognize it in myself and I can recognize it in you. Because remember, love, honesty, sadness, those are not specific to any one culture or person. Those are frequencies. So if I practice being honest to myself, that's not a moral thing. That's frequency. I'm going to also recognize an honest frequency. So when people come to me and I go into a room and I can feel the vibration, it's not because I'm a prophet or I'm magic. It's because I'm constantly digging and shredding myself, constantly being present,
Right.
emptying my tank. I don't know everything. Everything is new. I know everything. I know nothing at all. And I'm constantly working in that position of neutrality. And that's difficult because the business model that we're in is about, I give you this, you give me this in exchange.
You're talking about this right now.
Right now,
situation
right now.
With business practices,
Right now,
mostly.
right now, even right now, at social media. You support my page, I'll support you. Compassion, I support you, I want nothing in return. Where are those models at? And that's what's difficult for me, to want to engage with this current capitalistic framework, is because my inherent nature is to want to give unselfishly, because I've done that to myself. I've forgiven myself. I've learned to love myself unconditionally for my flaws. And now what I'm more so interested is about how can I align myself. And so my business model collectively, as I start building this ecosystem, I'm using it as a vetting system, because as I start sharing my tools that I've developed over time to help me manage this space, I want to see, as I do the podcast or through the clothing or through my consulting, that I can align myself with folks. Because now that I'm ready to kind of put myself out there, I realize the value of community. You know what I mean? And so now I'm going to put myself out there. You know, in terms of community, I've had some bad relationships in the past, but I haven't been beaten up enough to not want to still take a chance on community. It's just like a woman that's been in, or a man or anybody that's been in an abusive relationship. I had to ask myself about that in my second marriage with my wife, Kim. My mom is a perfect example. She was an amazing wife, mother, caregiver, just everything. But she gave so much to the point where she lost herself, and the men didn't know how to appreciate that, to the point where now loving for her is just is out of the question. Everybody has their vulnerability. And I had to ask myself that question in my second marriage. Have I been beaten up enough? Or have I been beaten up too much to the point where I can't give that vulnerability a chance again? And that's the questions I had to ask myself with Kim, my second wife. And I said no, immediately. So I'm at that point now where, as I'm going to start modeling this type of work, I'm hoping through this modeling, with digital storytelling, and through all these things that I'm offering, it can resonate with somebody, and I can find myself with a community that's like-minded, and we can build.
And essentially, you're offering wisdom, frameworks, and abilities and tools for people to navigate this thing you call inner chaos.
Yeah. So
What is that inner chaos?
my specific focus as a consultant is I use wellness, I use educational tools, and basic kind of fundamentals in business to help people really investigate the depths of themselves. And as you investigate the depths and you strip yourself down, here are some other workshops that help you investigate and really extrapolate what are the uniqueness and the gold nuggets for yourself. And once you pull out those gold nuggets for yourself, whether it's an individual through life coaching, whether it's a business consulting through whatever industry you're in, then the next step is for me to look at your business framework and see how we're maximizing that. Whether you need to be a sole proprietor, an LLC, or within your business framework, your policy, education, whatever it may be. And it's these neutral things that I've had to, and that are a result of my own experience. Because again, one of the big things that being a person that was in the community with influence and power and position, I'm constantly reevaluating. One of my philosophers that I love is Paulo Freire, in his book in pedagogy.
What's his name?
Paulo Freire.
Paulo Freire.
Yeah, and he in one of his books, Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
You're already on the way, by the way, because I wanted to transition into energy
Yeah.
and the philosophical nature of energy, because I imagine this is what the outcome, the desired outcome is after this, is to cultivate more energy. So please talk
Yeah.
about.
So there's two kind of living philosophies that I've been branding myself behind. One was from Stephen Biko, and it was this quote that he said, I'd rather die for an idea that will live than live for an idea that will die. So that was something that I kind of stayed with so anytime I thought about something that was really important for me, not to get too crazy, but I would ask myself, like, am I willing to die for this? That's why I didn't want to play football. Like, I'm not willing to put, like, one of my good friends, Curtis Williams, he broke his neck playing football and then died a year and a half later. I had to ask myself that question. Do I like football enough to be able to put my life on the line, hitting and doing all this? And I was like, nay. And so I was like, so what does that mean?
So this is like your compass.
Yeah, that was the compass with that, asking these questions. Paulo Freire is the other kind of side of that coin. Well, okay, here's an idea that I'm willing to live for or die for. That's a privilege, and that's, a position of power. Now Paulo Freire talks about when you're in a position of power and you've relinquished that power to someone that hasn't had that power before, letting them struggle in that power. But what are you doing from that position of power, and you're comfortable? How are you mentoring and supporting those that never had power before? As an example, you look at South Africa and their young democracy. One of the things that you'll find in the past, they'll make comparisons. They'll talk about the U.S. government will say it a lot. South Africa's government is corrupt and they're all this and that, you know what I mean? But if you got to think about it, who was modeling their governmental framework to them? Right? So when you start thinking about modeling behavior, and you start thinking about that aspect,
You need to responsibility and accountability.
position of power and privilege.
So who's deflecting? What nations are deflecting their problems onto others, projecting?
So thinking about me,
It gets
yeah,
I see what you mean
can
by
go real
macro.
quick, right? You can get big real quick. So then for me, how do I apply that to myself? I have a position of power and privilege every time I walk into the room. One, I have a physical presence where I can almost literally either beat up everybody in the room physically cause a problem, or with my voice, dominate with just my vocal ability, with the grounding of the space. I can literally, like, I have a presence with my swag, all those things. And then also too, when I know how to disrupt other people's energy. I know how to make them feel uncomfortable. I also can make them feel intimidated, or I can also challenge them. These are all the things that I have, attributes that I've been evaluating. How do I use that when I'm on the basketball court?
Or not use it, right?
Exactly. When I'm talking to women or when I'm doing workshops, do I stand over people or do I squat down and try to look at them eye to eye? Like, I'm always constantly evaluating the positions of power. And then also when I'm relinquishing, kind of like, and that's like when I'm quiet, allowing you to talk, or when I'm in a workshop, allowing this group to kind of take the lead. So I'm always trying to find ways to relinquish and be aware of my position in power, but also not to get comfortable with it. Because I do believe what happens with privilege unchecked or not evaluated, or power unchecked and not evaluated, the comfort of those privileges really can be corrosive. Because technically, we don't have to care. Like, as a man, I don't have to care about women's rights, or I don't have to care about your safety or the harmony of the space, technically. But I make a choice. And so I'm being more aware of those choices and how I'm using it. And the more aware of the choices, then I become more aware of how to use that. And now the difficulty is sometimes I want to use that power and privilege and all these different things. And how do I deal with the turmoil? And that's where the meditation, the yoga, the breathing, because the depression, the sadness, the happiness, all those emotions don't go away. The tools in which I've been developing and want to share now are just mechanisms to help me manage, and it helps shorten the time of those experiences.
That's very similar to, me and the co-founder of this show. We really like, I don't know if you saw the Stutz documentary with Jonah Hill. And Stutz gives a lot of tools and frameworks to deal with what he says is the three constants of our life, which is pain, uncertainty, and constant work. Things that never go away, which is very reminiscent of one of the first great teachers of that practice, Siddhartha Buddha, with Buddhism, of like understanding that suffering is a constant in our life and it will never go away. but how do we maintain and manage that suffering? I wanted to ask you, what is a tool, like you're in yourself, you are in a framework of Anthony Kelley, stature, physical attributes, intellect, etc. But for our audience members who might maybe, let's say, be short or shy or timid or overthinking or anxious, like what's a framework? How do they put themselves, for people who don't feel like they already have any power or privilege, how, do you think they want it? Should they want to get that? Should they achieve that? Like, help me navigate that. For people who
the thing is, it's different for everybody, and that's what becomes difficult about this process. And that was becoming that because what's hard is that when it came from me becoming an entrepreneur and this speaker on these particular topics, one thing that I didn't like is when you become like a motivational speaker or I don't know, an intellectual deemed by society, they're really anxious to put you as an expert. Like this is what you need to do. And so what I've been trying to work hard at is looking at these neutral principles that people can explore that allow them to uncover their own kind of gaps and issues. So it's important for them to know how to resolve their own issues.
you're like, this is what worked for me.
Yeah.
I don't know what's gonna work for you.
But you can try these. So when it comes to people, so for instance, when I ask a lot of people that may have anxiety, when they have issues of seeking what their purpose is, why, a big thing that I'm looking at is just like, what is the why behind whatever you're asking? That's the first thing I'm always asking. Why is that important? Because what I like to chew down to the bone, like when I, for instance, like if I was going to practice with you, I would say, as an exercise, why is it important for you to start this podcast? I'm asking.
I can answer.
Yes. I'm going to do an exercise with you.
All right, perfect. Because I feel like there's a lot of information or messages that we share off record that are so impactful and powerful that I feel should be shared with more people.
Why is that important?
Because I feel like the more that people have that information, the more harmonious we can eventually become if we're all on this frequency, this kind of same page.
How do you know that's important?
Because I've experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
I've felt it when you're in a room with people that you trust, that you respect, that you have love for, and I've seen the result of it.
Who's modeled that behavior for you? How did you come to understand that these type of practices are important?
The who is hard. I mean, the who can be people in this right now time and in historic. So I've seen these who's and these moments happen different points in history through my own readings and stuff like that. What was the last part?
It was just the why. And so that why is important for people to chew down to the bone. And a lot of times when I ask folks about what they're doing, I help them chew it down to the bone. And then the next step is looking at, like, if you're going to be trying to do something, whether you want to be big or whatever it is, it's like, what are the resources that you directly have in front of you? Because what I had to do was not think about budget, not think about money, not thinking about who was there because I didn't have them. Like when my mentors and everybody walked away, I really wanted to think about what was important to me and when those things revealed itself, because everybody's intuition is different, you know what I mean? And so when I started shedding myself of particular ideals, like I have an exercise where I'll ask someone like, what's important to them? And then they make a list. And then I'll ask them a second question. Okay, think about it really hard. So what's really important to you? You know what I mean? And then they gotta like crunch that list down. And then I'll ask them to do it another time. Like, okay, now, if you really, really had to keep things same, you had to do without. So I'm like, and you keep having them whittle it down. And what's important is when you whittle down to you what you're about, and I'm talking about why you wear your clothes, why you support Christianity or family structure or tradition, and you chew those things, what you start uncovering is your ego. And the ego, the way I define it, is your collective knowledge. And so right now, what I would say, the reason why you're putting together this podcast is because in your collective knowledge, this is something that your mind and your spirit has stamped as approved. Like, this is important to me, and this is something I'm willing to give effort to. And everything that you've built up into this point has justified you being able to do this action. And now, go ahead.
I was like, here's another question. Does that even relate to me as a person, or does that relate to something else?
Well, I think people need to understand how their ego plays in their life, not as a good and bad thing, but how they're being informed. So, like, your ego represents your personal narrative. Like, for instance, when we can go to just like when I was growing up in, as a kid, there was white folks that used to call me nigga, you know what I mean?
Right.
Then there was black folks who used to call me nigga, you know what I mean? Two different experiences, two different narratives. White folks as a way, using it as a derogatory term to harm me. My people using it as a word of empowerment and enrichment, as endearment, you know what I mean? And so I had these two experiences that both inform my narrative, you know what I mean? So when it comes to thinking about like, my issues with other races outside of me, I had to really understand that I had an experience that informed that. And now, am I willing to challenge that?
Right.
Like, not all white folks are racist. Not all black people are good. You know what I mean? And so I had to really chew these ideas, because as an activist, especially when you start dealing with communities from like the Polynesian community, women's community, from the educational community, the LGBTQ community, all these different communities are experiencing different emotional dispositions. It's not really a race thing. It's the trouble of the human experience. How we're learning to communicate with each other. How are we dealing with disagreement? How are we dealing when you lied to me and then you have a position of power? Like when I worked in the community, I worked in the Native American community, and they have a long history of historically white institutions giving them promises and lying. So I had to go into these communities talking with the Native elders and had to reconcile and serve as a catalyst between that relationship between University of Washington and the Eldon community. And so for me, acknowledging my ego, my position in power, and how am I reconciling my issues with my father and with my mom? Because those very practices and how I learned to reconcile are the same existing problems that these communities have. What we forget is that if we can learn to deal with the inner turmoil of what's going on here inside of us, that becomes the very tool to help us better navigate the world. The way we think about it is we look for examples of ourselves in the world to try to make sense of everything, versus looking within ourselves and knowing that we have all the information we need. But what's hard is distraction, money, fame, ego, hunger, and frequency, and all these different things. And so I'm just hoping with the ecosystem and the resources that I'm sharing within my business framework, once I launch it, it gives people a chance to show, here's kind of how I've learned to manage the chaos. Here are the tools that I'm sharing for you all. And hopefully these tools can help you unravel your own gaps so you can find the answers to your own problems. And then if we would like, here are some other resources for us to kind of come together on it as a community, and let's build and see what we can do. And so and that's kind of where I'm building right now with phase one.
That's fine. Speaking of tools too, like here we are, 2024.
Yeah.
You know what's happening technologically.
Yeah.
Human civilization wise. How's that affecting these practices? This increase in
great.
technology / decrease in human.
Yeah, that's dope that you said that, because I think it's no different than any way I've approached anything else in my life. Now, when I found one of the things that I feel like may be a gift is that I'm very comfortable in being uncomfortable. And so right now, with the discomfort people are feeling with the rise of AI and this boom of technology, all I look at it is a relationship. Because when you look at, to me, when I look at AI is informed from the human experience. That's it. And so when they talk about, they're worried about how AI is going to take over and talking about how it becomes sentient and thinking on its own, the only thing that AI can ever reference is the experience in which we have given it. So the things that we very fear in AI are the very things that we have to fear within ourselves. You know what I mean? So for me, when I talk about AI, when I use ChatGPT, I look at AI as a relationship. The positivity, thank you, welcome. I'm being very clear about what I want to do.
Thank you to the AI?
Yep.
You one of those?
Yeah, I'm not.
Sometimes I forget to say thank
well,
you.
it's not. Like, no, but you got to understand my relationship with athletics.
Yeah, please.
So I'm not even saying thank you as like it's a thing, but when I think about athletics, when I go to the basketball court, that's a relationship that I have with the basketball court and the basketball. When I go sit down at this meditation spot consistently for 2 hours a day, that's a vibrational frequency that I'm developing there. That's why when people build altars, that's important because that's sacred space.
Oh, so we're talking intentional. So
Intentional.
you're even intentional
Everything.
with how you're communicating
Everything.
with new technology.
Everything. Because my intention is the determiner of my outcome. That's what I believe. So when I think about when I go into something, my intentions. So if I go into business with you and my intentions is to make a lot of money and I don't give a shit about nothing else, that's what's going to come out of that. But if I'm talking about making money with you, but I want to make sure that we're clear about how we're making money. And not only how we're making money, but where that money is going and how we're using it and how we're communicating doing that money. Like, that's important to me because that frequency and vibration is a result of how it manifests in the physical. One of the phrases that I really truly believe in is as above, so below. And what that means is, to me, is whatever seeds I plant within my spirit is going to manifest in the physical. Whatever seeds I plant and practice in my physical, that's going to manifest in my spirit. And so when I think about AI, my business, my relationship, this podcast, my position with the Knights basketball, my money that I make that goes into my bank account, why do I have that? What is the intention behind that? Because the more I align those frequencies, that allows me to better strengthen my manifestation powers because that's how I think and I speak into the world. And so as I get better with aligning these things, what I'm dealing with is more so like my patience, my own ego, my frustrations, other people, because mainly like I'm clear in my vision, but what gets in my way is when I have to do a podcast and I got to think about editing, and then I got to think about how I'm marketing it, and then I got to pay ad fees. That's the gets in my way. And then when I think about having to do a workshop, I'll do a workshop for free. I'll do 120, 200 people. But the issue is that I got to develop a brochure. I got to make sure the language is clear. I got to get booked contract first. I got to speak to the people that are in charge of the budget. There's all this shit that gets in the way of me being able to do the work. So by me establishing my own institutional framework, my own bylaws, my own framework, and now gives me the prowess within this capitalistic framework to navigate appropriately and at the right pace. Now I'm just putting it together, and that's the.
And on that, let's talk about phenomenon. Like, let's talk about the peak because we've just navigated through the why, the wisdom, the reasons, the energy behind all this. But what does that manifest into? Like, I almost want to ask you, like, what is your dream scenario of a lifestyle? Or what have you already experienced that was a peak into this ideal phenomenon of everything being in alignment?
I think the difficult part with me in this process is like I see the line. So like as a mountain climber, you know, I see you climb the mountain, you know, they look for that line to climb up the rocks, free climbers. Right. I see the line where I need a free climb up this rocky terrain. I see the success. I already see the vision. I already see the success walking, my house. I already see it. It's the journey that I'm going through right now, and that's sometimes what I struggle with, because the journey is the teacher and the crafter and the you know, manager of my experience that helps me. And so what happens is I have to be very cognizant of where I'm at and to value the struggles that I'm going through. So like being in Taiwan, like for instance, like I could leave Taiwan right now if I want to, but the way I go about it is I speak life into it. I ask very plainly, just how I speak to you. I try to be very as clear as I can when I speak out, because everything you say matters in my mind. And so when I ask the universe, where do I need to be? And where is it that you want me to be exactly, and provide the resources that I need to be. So what I try to practice, honestly, is to be absolutely present. I try to follow through in the relationships that are directly in front of me and trying to see exactly where the universe wants me to be. And so I try to stay there because the practice is trying to stay neutral. And so the things that I'm just working on right now are the things that I started, I'm taking responsibility for. I started that damn website, so I got to finish it. I started this idea with the LLC and the business, so I'm just trying to fulfill and finish what I started. Now that's because I'm taking on responsibility and finishing what I started, and because what I'm starting and what I'm doing is pretty difficult. It's forced me to have to be very mindful about my capacity and my boundaries. You know what I mean? So now with developing my business model is also a result of how I've learned to understand and distinguish my boundaries in terms of what my capacity is and what I can and cannot do, within this, framework, And
Right.
so I'm hoping that with this first phase, it becomes an appropriate revenue vetting system to connect with the appropriate community that I can build on other things. Because I think the blend between balance and technology is going to be very powerful in the future. And I just think we need to create more models and institutional frameworks and community models that really show folks how are we using technological breakthroughs and then also maintaining the balance as a human being on this earth with plants and life and stuff like that. And so that's where I feel like the journey of my kind of work is going. I'm just taking this first end of my life and kind of putting it within this framework of sharing, here's what I've learned so far.
Right.
That's kind of where that's at.
Here's a fun question. If you had $1 billion, 1B, with a capital B, $1 billion investment right now, how would you break that down? What would be the first thing you do?
$1 billion invest at the top of my head.
Because we're talking about energy, we're talking about revenue.
Yeah.
Let's say someone hears this podcast says, "Ed, I got $1 billion I need to use in a great way." What's it like?
I mean, I don't want to say cliche, but I mean, of course, I would invest that into an institutional framework school, that would emphasize, the reconciliation of emotional trauma and these things, but then also too providing open source information to allow folks to better design exactly what they need.
You're starting a school first.
Well,
You're creating a.
Well, I'm using my first phase as the seed money for that, because eventually I'm gonna have a tech school, like a space, all that type of. But basically, what I'm doing is using what I've learned so far, in my life. And how I'm using digital storytelling and media, social media, as a way to capture what my philosophical and kind of ideals are. And that's going to be through the consulting that I help people with, right. Services virtually and in person.
And people can access your curriculum today.
Yeah, I haven't finished the website, but I'm still editing. We officially launched in June, nice. And then the course website will be the tools and courses that I've developed personally over a mechanism of time that will be offered, free demos, and then I'll have my clothing line that will be paired with kind of this lifestyle that will help reflect kind of the ideas and principles that I want to do, and then I'll use the podcast. Once developing that team as a way to do kind of burst promotion. So we'll have segmented series of time, not just ongoing, but making it limited, but valued, but also scarce, because, I don't want, it's important for people to value what we have. And so putting together a dynamic team that we can work selflessly together to communicate this message, I believe the revenue and the success will come. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm looking for right now.
Speaking of that, how do you define success? Like, what's the definition of success?
Well, I think success is when you know absolutely in your heart self that you're being your absolute best self no matter what, no matter how awkward that is. So what I mean is you have to be who you are no matter what. And what I mean is, and I'm not talking about being yourself, and that means that, you fit within this particular society framework. Right. If you're like a cynical jerk sometimes, be honest about your cynicality and how much of a jerk you are. Because at the bare basics, you being honest with yourself and those around you, no matter what, how offensive it may be, especially if you're trying to do it with love and compassion, what you're practicing is self-care, self-love. And no matter what I believe is, if you're practicing, and you're the only person that really knows when you're being honest with yourself, that's why I've relinquished the burden of trying to convince people of stuff, sharing, and you're going to have to make that decision whether or not this is valuable or not. And you're the only one that knows if you're putting your best effort forward. So I think when people choose to love themselves unconditionally and be bold and beautiful about that, no matter what, I think that sets a precedence for creating things that are unknown and beautiful. Because the structure of knowing is, I think, a comfort that I think is rooted in really a masculine framework. But introducing more feminine energy allows you to kind of be more comfortable with the unknown, and I believe that is something that is happening now with the age of Aquarius and stuff like that.
And it seems like a consistent theme, this idea of the unknown. There's an unknown
being comfortable with not
energy
knowing.
wave coming. I wanted to ask you, since we're here, the show is called Beyond the Hustle. How would you define going beyond the hustle?
Well, when I hear the title, it makes me think about the status quo, because the status quo is get that money, get that cash, and when you say go beyond, it makes me think like, let's get that money, let's get that cash, but why?
Mm.
That's what it makes me think about when I think about your title. So
It's like we're going back to fundamentals.
yes, it's not nothing wrong with being successful. Nothing wrong with getting money. Nothing wrong with trying to get
But
after.
where's your why?
But where's the
Where's
why at? Why are we doing this? And I feel like beyond the hustle is helping you take a moment to think about, okay, your hustle is dope, but what does that mean and why? And so when you say beyond, because right now the hustle could be a very surface thing, and when you say beyond, that means you want to go somewhere deeper. So that's what I thought.
So, what, like on that note, what are your visions for the future of humanity on Earth?
I don't,
Civilization, here we are. I know that's a big one, but
yeah, I don't have
with that in
vision.
mind, what
I
do you
think
foresee?
I don't see I don't look at humanity in in that viewpoint. I look at it more so as that if I'm able to be my best self at the most present, and by me being my best self, it's going to allow me to be able to maximize my service to society. So by me being able to be my best self, by me being able to be absolutely honest and transparent about what I can offer, my limitations, about where my gaps are, and within that community framework that allows me to do that, that allows me to be my best self for that community, because I'll shift and I'll adjust accordingly. And so I think being a part of a societal framework that allows me to be my best self, but has a community and institutional framework that perpetuates that practice. And I'm making an attempt right now to try to build such model with my first phase.
To allow people to be their best selves.
So when I work with them through life coaching or through businesses, that type of workshop and grounding is going to allow me to be able to do that for them. And so as a business, my workshops and work with you is going to allow your business to be its best self within that framework. Or as a life coach, I'll be able to work with you to extrapolate whatever nuggets you need to allow you to be your best self. As an athlete, or whatever it may be.
That's dope. Before we sign off, in conclusion, I mean, we're here in Taiwan. I know you got the nice jersey on. So like you're a man of many talents. You're here on the forefront of education, intellect, coaching, but you're also still balling.
Yeah, I mean, like the Knights organization. This is a new organization, and we're 3-on-3 FIBA league, and we're trying to make a run for the World Cup.
Really?
And we got a squad. We started last year, and we made a present in the tournament last year. And my philosophy was more so because my teammates are my friend and my family, and so because I've had my athletic experience before, I really have no aspirations of like being anything famous in this realm, but more so fulfilling an obligation with my boys. Like we started on this journey together, so let's see how we can do our best together. So taking my abilities and taking my gifts and how I can best serve in this capacity is what I'm really looking forward to. And this second year coming in, we're really coming together, so it's
So
excited.
you got some checks.
Yeah, and
I saw you holding up some big checkboards.
yeah, and so I got, I had a little shoulder injury, both shoulders, because of past and stuff like that. But I'm excited about this season coming up, and the Knights organization is doing well marketing wise and putting itself in a position to be successful. And aside from it too, it's kind of cool because I'm 20 something years older than everybody in the squad. So for me to be at my age and to be able to still compete, you know what I mean? I appreciate it. So I'm just gonna have fun and play good ball.
That's fire. On a fun note, I know we covered a lot of deep, intricate topics. Let's talk a little loosely about like what I'm still curious about, like what gets you hyped. Like, is there certain music you listen to, a certain place that gives you that energy, that perspective, that like charges you up, something for the viewers to take away?
Well, three things that I like, is the kind of music I'm listening to right now is I'm listening to the Cannons right now. There's this music group out there, and they have a nice little groove. But I'm a big salsa bachata dancer. I love grooving out there. Me and my wife, we like cutting rugs. And in terms of what was the last question you said? What else?
Oh, like a specific location, like Are you in the mountain under a waterfall
Well,
meditating?
right
Like,
now because I'm in the city, so I'm in the city, and so I have a fifth floor apartment that's actually pretty dope, and it has a huge balcony. So that's mainly where I spend a lot of my time. I get up in the morning and I do my breathing work, and because the sun like rises right on me, I get that energy right in the morning to do the breathing, the meditation, the chilling, and then that's kind of like my tower, and it's above to this, smog, because sometimes so I'm up there, and it's actually really quiet because it's in an older neighborhood, and so actually my favorite time currently in Taiwan is around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. In my neighborhood,
you just
it's
sun soaking.
it's in the morning, completely dark.
Oh, really?
I get out at night and I'm like kind of walking out by myself, and
Oh, it's 30 in the morning. That's
I put my roller skates on, and I'm out there roller skating through the neighborhood.
Yeah,
You
I
know what I
had
mean?
to ask because I'm an athlete myself,
Yeah.
and like you said, you're 20 years older than cats, but you're still dominating.
Mm,
So like you obviously take care of yourself
mm.
physically and mentally. So that's really cool that you make time for yourself to like soak up
Yeah,
that
it's
sun.
intentional, and it's different for everyone. And so
Yeah,
as I start working with folks, I try to really make it clear, because a lot of folks will see what I'm doing sometimes, and they'll immediately want to just replicate. And I really try to make it important. It's like, don't think about what's working for AK, because I'm a completely different experience. Think about what's for you. And so the work that I do with folks helps me unravel this, especially similarly to how I coach athletes. When I coach basketball players, football, track athletes,
yeah,
those drills and exercises that I give them will expose the gaps within themselves. So it's not me telling you you're a shitty athlete or where you need to improve. It's yourself. And that's what I think is more important, because we're in a framework right now on a global scale where everybody's pointing the fingers. You're wrong. You're wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. You know what I mean? But what nobody's saying is, how do they contribute to that chaos? And everybody has a hand in this chaos. When you talk about the United States, my homeland, they're exactly in the state they need to be. When you think about China, when you think about any of these countries, all you got to do is think about modeling behavior, community support, institutional framework, and you'll be able to track down those things. So for me, I'm very, very tentative when it comes to supporting others and telling, this is what you need to do. What I more so like to do is, here's some tools you can practice, and this may help you find the answer that you need. Because when you come to the answer on your own, that's teaching you how to fish. Now you know how to feed yourself. And what I want to try to feed people is that deep skill of true self-love. You learn that self-love, there's not a fucking thing you can't do. You know what I mean? Because that ties into the manifestation. One of the most powerful things to help manifest energy, hone it, manage it, you know what I mean? So that's kind of the philosophy and the kind of big idea that I'm rooted in, and letting my life and what I'm doing be a reflection of that.
that's crazy. That's amazing. So as you know, we're sitting here. It's Taiwan. We're at CoreCultural offices,
Mm.
studio, art gallery. When you look at all these art on the wall, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? What kind of art do you want to create yourself? And is there an art or artist who really just like puts you in a framework that
Um,
transcends you?
I mean, for me, I've done, in terms of like, that moves me, like, another part of like my interest is like, when I think about legacy, I don't think about myself in that capacity. I look at myself as an energetic entity. I'm a ball of energy. And with this energy, I have this physical form. And within this physical form, I have a chance to really better understand and craft my energetic practices, with love, compassion, forgiveness, those things. And so, because I believe like my energy is eternal. And I'm going to go on to another thing. So right now, what I'm trying to do is really take heed to the circumstance that I'm in. What is it that I need to be learning, and make sure I'm learning those things, and to embrace the learning experience with compassion and love and joy. And that's really kind of where I'm at now, where I'm kind of struggling, because it sometimes sucks being in a neutral space when nothing's happening, and your soul and everything around you is moving. And that's another thing that's sometimes difficult, that we don't talk about when you become more awoken to your intuition and your spiritual prowess, is that, when your spirit is talking, it's talking. When it's not, and you have to be still, or when you sometimes have to not hear anything and be okay with not hearing anything, you know what I mean? And not making a move because you're like, I'm not doing it right now, so let me just do something. Always chewing down to the bone, it becomes very fatiguing. And so one of the things that I really implore people as a life coach, or if I'm mentoring or consulting for a business, is that what are those regenerative practices that you're looking at? As an athlete, as a teacher, as a professor, whatever, how are you regenerating yourself to come back to the table to be your best self? So when I think about that in my relationships, like with you, you know what I mean? Like, you're my boy, and every time we talk, I try to make sure that I'm as present as I can to be my best self for you. But I can't do that with everybody. That's why I respond to you and not everybody else. You get what I mean? And so when you start understanding your capacity and your limitations and start putting up those boundaries, you then are able to better understand how to focus your energies. And that becomes difficult too, because that becomes decisions on your family, what type of traditions they're practicing, what type of learnings you're doing, where you put your money, where you're putting your energy. And I challenged all those to the point where I don't have no religious framework. I believe in what I do every day creates intention. I know that there's something more superior to me, and I know that I have, because I do astral projection, I do dream traveling. I mean, I'm traveling in so many different realms. When you start talking about religion to me, I'm just like, well, what you're talking about is not necessarily consistent. You know what I mean? Because when I'm in the astral realm, there's no dollars there. There's no nothing. I'm in there looking at, vibrations and frequencies and other entities that have shit to do with this social media post. You get what I mean? So
that's gonna be a whole
and that's what makes it difficult. That's
podcast.
I'm constantly I'm constantly working in that realm.
That's
and so,
truly beyond the hustle.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm constantly working on. So it's good to be aware of the tension and the conflict. And so having opportunities to speak on podcasts, to connect with other people, just gives me a chance to further refine my practice and to manage better, because it sucks to kind of do it by yourself, sometimes isolated.
I feel you. Well, truly grateful for having you on the podcast.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
I feel like we covered a lot. Tip of the iceberg, of course. So we'll leave it for the next time you come on when, we got better mics and everything is fine. For now, I think that's been amazing, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, bro.
Time,
yeah, all love.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right, brother.
Yep.
Talk soon, man.
Fire.
Yes, sir. That's a lot. That's a lot of good knowledge.